All right, man, peace. So those of us who remember the 2002 Western Conference Finals between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Sacramento Kings know that that was one of the great playoff series of all time because of the theatrics and the drama that occurred throughout that series. It was also one of the most controversial series of all time because of the officiating and numerous other events that occurred over the course of that series. Now, for those of us who remember, the turning point of the series was Game 4, in which the Lakers, who were already down 2-1, were trailing by 20-plus points in L.A. They made a furious comeback, which culminated in a Robert Horry game-winning three-pointer. Well, there's a series on the NBA Network called What If, in which they engage in hypothetical scenarios that would detail what may have occurred had certain pivotal moments not happened. In this case, they're trying to conjecture on what may have happened with the Sacramento Kings franchise had Robert Horry not made that game-winning three. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
It's one of the greatest shots in NBA playoff history. Robert Horry's buzzer-beating three from the top of the key in Game 4 of the 2002 Western Conference Finals. It's a moment to help earn the nickname Big Shot Bob. He gave the Lakers a 1-point win and tied the series at 2 games apiece. The Lakers eventually won in 7. But what if Horry's shot bounced out and the Kings won that game? In episode 3 of the series, What If, we examined how things could have been different in the 2002 playoffs and how the Lakers might not have three-peated that year.
Let me say this. The whole what if scenario, it's good television programming because sports fans like to engage in conjecture. For those of you who grew up collecting comic books back in the day, you remember that Marvel Comics also had a series called What If. And what the What If platform allows people to do is to engage in oftentimes unbelievable storylines. Like back in the day when Marvel Comics had the What If series, oftentimes in the stories they would have Spider-Man get killed or the Hulk become a mass murderer, things like that you can do in a hypothetical series. So whoever came up with this idea, it was a good idea.
And the Lakers fall for time. 11 and 8 seconds to go. Lakers have come back from 24. The Kings try to hold on. They're up by 2.
What's going through your mind at that point?
Keep Shaq off the boards and try to take this home, because if you get up 3-1, we're going back to the cowbells. It's over.
Our ball, we're at home. Not really worried because Kobe's probably going to take the shot.
Well, first off, you already knew Kobe was going to take the shot. Kobe always took you guys' pressure shots because they didn't trust you on the free throw line, Shaq. Let's be for real. In regards to Chris Webber's statements, I'm on record as stating that I believe that Chris Webber is a Hall of Famer. He certainly should have been inducted ahead of Tracy McGrady. But I'm also on record as stating about Chris Webber that although he was a great talent, he was terrible in the clutch. Terrible. And series like this are what make or break your legacy. Because if Chris Webber leads his team to a victory in this series, he goes into the finals and he beats the New Jersey Nets. And now you're talking about him as one of the great power forwards ever. Because he could do things, dribbling the ball, distributing the basketball, rebounding, scoring. He had very, very few weaknesses in his game, other than his basketball IQ in clutch moments.
And usually deadly in that position.
The only thing that was going through my mind was I was saying to myself, I hope Kobe is able to beat Doug Christie off the dribble and get to the basket. If not, we always had the big fella in Shaq there to get the rebound.
Kobe has it on the wing, so I'm D'ing him up. And I forced him into a tough shot. He missed it. So the first thing that went through my head is, yes, I finally got it. He missed. And then the ball kind of comes off at the rim, and I see Vlade tip it. And I said, yes. And then I looked, and I said, no.
It's a 2-point Sacramento lead. We're down to 6 7 seconds. Bryant putting the move on Christie. Rebound O'Neal.
Look, let me say this. First off, Doug Christie was a very good defender, but I don't know what he was celebrating about because Kobe blew right past him. But in normal Kobe fare, he missed the game-winning shot. Kobe Bryant is one of the more overrated clutch time performers, and I know a lot of the Kobe Bryant superfans are going to get upset by that. When you look at his proficiency numbers and his efficiency numbers in the clutch, his shooting percentage was terrible. He oftentimes took bad shots, but what he was cold-blooded and conscienceless. He had no conscience in the clutch, which is what made him somebody who was dangerous. He was very, very dangerous, but he was not proficient. But he was also the best player that they had in regards to creating his own shot and executing down the stretch of games. They couldn't trust Shaq because Shaq was so up and down on the free throw line, even though he was their best and most dominant player. But what took the Lakers over the top was Phil Jackson and many of his mind control tactics, particularly pertaining to Zen Buddhism, which he used to train players on how to maintain a very even disposition in clutch time moments, which is basically the difference between winning a championship and going out in the second round. When you evaluate the NBA playoffs, there's not much difference between the best team and the teams that lose in the second round other than their ability to execute in those clutch moments, the last minute, the last 30 seconds, the last 10 seconds. And then when you have players with a high intangible meter, like a Robert Horry, who's one of the great role players in NBA history. I mean, I'm sure that even though he's not a Hall of Famer, there are people who would consider him as possibly being someone who could go on a ballot just because of how he was able to contribute to championship teams.
Oh, I knew it was good. You know, it's almost like one of those ones when you're playing good, you're feeling good, and you're feeling hot, and you let it go. You say it's going to be a split splash.
When Horry shot went in, I kind of didn't believe it, but I looked at the crowd and looked at everybody else. Everybody else was just going crazy. The defense, those guys started running towards the locker room, so I just followed them.
I remember stretching as hard as I could, trying to block a shot at the end of the game. That's what I remember about Game 4.
I see Webb he stretched like everything out. So I'm running too. And a lot of times when you contest a three-pointer like that, it's tough because you give them something to judge off of. And when that shot went up, it just went quiet to me. And it would seem like it was in the air forever.
I remember watching this game live. And I was rooting for the Kings that year because I liked their team. And I thought that the Lakers had, they had done what they needed to do. They'd won back-to-back already. I didn't think that they were the better team. I certainly did not think that they were better than the Kings, but they were definitely smarter and they had more experience. But you could tell a team that is winning a championship off of experience, and that was the 2002 Lakers. Oftentimes when you have dynastic teams, the last championship that they win just off of experience. When you look at the 69 Celtics, when they beat the Lakers, I think they came back from down 3-1. If I remember correctly. If I'm wrong, one of you brothers can correct me. I know that they were able to win Game 7 in L.A., a very classic game where Don Nelson hit a jump shot that the ball ricocheted all the way up to the ceiling almost and then came right back down to the net. When the Lakers won in 88 against the Pistons, they were not the better team. They were just a team really that won that series off of experience. When the Bulls won in 98, they really won that series off of experience. They won that championship off of experience. Even though I think that if they had been brought back in 99, they probably would have won again. But that definitely would have been their last one. And the 02 Lakers, to me, they fit into that archetype of a team that really, that year, 2002, they were not the best team in my view. I think the Kings were better, but they just were not smarter. And your lead player has to have high basketball acumen in those moments. And Chris Webber just didn't have that. In regards to intangibles, he came up a little short. That's the main difference between a guy like him and a guy like Tim Duncan.
When you feeling good and shooting good, it doesn't matter who runs at you. You see a shadow coming, but if they not tall enough to get there and your shot is quick enough, you don't even worry about it. I didn't notice he was there until I saw the steals of the shot, and I saw him coming at me.
Big shot Bob saved me a lot of times. I've said it many times, if it wasn't for guys like B. Shaw, Rick Fox, and Big Shot Bob, I probably only have one championship rather than four.
Shaq is probably the most dominant player in NBA history, certainly of the last 45 years, since Wilt left. But he certainly was someone who needed to be in the right environment because his deficiencies would not have allowed him to bring to the table what a championship team would have needed down the stretch of games. He wasn't like a Kareem. Like what makes Kareem arguably the greatest basketball player ever is that he's one of the few centers, other than Olajuwon, who could also dominate in clutch moments because you were not scared to go to him because he had finesse and he had touch and he was great at the free throw line. That's the difference between Kareem and Hakeem and a Wilt and a Shaq. And the only reason why I put Shaq and Wilt ahead of Hakeem is because they were able to win more championships. And in the case of Wilt only won 2, just like Hakeem won 2, but Wilt's dominance over a longer period of time, I had to give him credit over Hakeem. But to me, Hakeem is the most skilled big man to ever play. Like I get guys who come into my comments who think that Hakeem is top 5. Look, I'm not going to go back and forth with you too much. Hakeem was just out of this world.
The Kings are about to go up 3-1. Kobe Bryant has a last-second opportunity, and then Shaq has a possibility at a rebound and a back tap by Ronnie Divac. And in some way, that was the right play. He just wanted to get away from the rim with Shaquille O'Neal there. Ends up in the hands of Robert Horry, and then...
And no, that was not the right play. The right play is to grab the basketball and let them put you on the free throw line. You're up 2, you make 2 free throws, the game is over. The right play is to get the rebound, not to tap it out. That was dumb by Vlade, who was a sneaky bastard while he was playing. He was one of the guys who popularized the flop and set the NBA back. I mean, if you want to know where the flop comes from, you go back to the 80s. Guys like Sarunas Marciulionis and then Dennis Rodman popularized the flop in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. But at least with Dennis Rodman, when he flopped, like he would really get hit. He would just accentuate it. But then it got to a level in the early 2000s with guys like Ginobili, guys who wouldn't even get in touch and they were falling down.
And then he fires the shot for 3, and all I can remember is saying yes, and the game's over.
I never asked Vlade this. I wish I thought that.
Before I let Kobe speak, let me say this about Marv Albert. It's amazing how certain guys can move past controversies. For those of you who remember back in the late 90s, Marv Albert was caught up in a controversy where he had bitten a prostitute to the point where he had broken his skin. Like, this dude, Marv Albert, is a sexual degenerate. Okay? And he just gets thrown back on TV like nothing. Let me rewind it back so we can hear all of what Kobe's saying.
Thought to ask.
And all I can remember is saying yes, and the game's over.
I never asked Vlade this. I wish I thought to ask him this. I never asked him why the hell he slapped the ball away like that. I don't understand that, because you have players on the perimeter. Why would you slap it to a point where the ball's literally bouncing to the 3-point line? I don't understand. If you're gonna slap it up and out.
The answer to that is simple. Vlade is he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, Kobe. All right, that's all there is to it.
Those kind of situations you don't think about, who has the ball. I mean, I don't think, he tried to beat the clock, Everybody could make that shot, that's last shot. It's just like a shot, that's all.
Vlade was trying to do what Magic Johnson did to the Portland Trailblazers when he got that ball and he threw it the length of the court and they beat them and they went to the finals versus Jordan for his first championship. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for us.
Drexler dribbling with 9. Drexler dribbling with 7. Drexler brings it to Porter. He shoots a winner. It's straight. It's no good. Lakers win. Magic's got it. Throws it down the floor. 1 second. And it goes out of bounds. And the Lakers are on their way to Chicago. The Lakers win it.
Let me say this. I remember watching that game as a kid. And Portland was favored to win that series over the Lakers. They had home court. And very few people remember that Portland team from the early 90s, like from around 89 to about 92, Well, they were one of the top 2 teams in the NBA every year. In 90, they went to the finals, lost to the Pistons. 91, they were in the Western Conference Finals, lost to the Lakers. And 92, they went to the finals and lost to the Bulls. The thing about that Portland team, they were very, very talented. They were very reminiscent of the OKC Thunder with Durant and Westbrook and Serge Ibaka. Very talented, but they had a very low basketball IQ. And that was their weakness. If they ever faced a team that was intelligent, they were going to lose. Because Terry Porter was very talented, their point guard. He's very talented, but he was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And Clyde Drexler was extremely talented, one of the top 5 shooting guards to ever play. But he was not a point guard, so he did not control the basketball. Then you had other guys like Buck Williams and Kevin Duckworth, Jerome Kersey on that team. Danny Ainge came on that team in 91. They were stacked. They just did not have much basketball IQ, which is the reason why they brought Danny Ainge on the team, because they were hoping that he could bring some of his experience from the Boston Celtics years and raise up their basketball acumen. But it didn't work.
Win it, ladies and gentlemen!
Wish you didn't tip the ball. I would.
But let me say this about what Magic did. The Magic Johnson play was one of the most brilliant plays I've ever seen. I remember being a little kid and watching him just grab the ball and throw it down the court like that. And the way he passed it, and it was almost like a reflex. He passed it in a way where it started to slow down as it was going down the court. So he was actually able to run the clock out. That had never been done before in basketball.
Tip the ball. I wish you would have just grabbed the ball. But so many chain of events had to happen for it to be, as spectacular as it was. And that's why you love sports. It's unfair to everybody, and it's fair to all.
That was a miraculous finish, and sometimes you wonder, if you've done everything right and your luck falls on your side.
The Lakers also did enough right over the next 3 games to beat the Kings in 7.
Well, the main thing that they did right over those next 3 games was the NBA were able to assist them in winning that series by having the referees give them every call possible, particularly in that Game 6 in LA, which is one of the worst officiated games in NBA history, certainly in playoff history, to the point where you had even accredited media members like Stephen A. Smith who were calling out the NBA for rigging the series and rigging that game. I get a lot of guys who come on my comments, talk about how all these games are rigged. A lot of these gematria dudes. I'm on record as stating, look, I'm not one of these guys who talks about how they bring in a player with the number 4, who sits on the end of the bench, 4th from the end of the bench with 4 minutes left to hit a 4-point play. I got these guys, these gematria guys. But does the NBA want certain teams to win? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Do they want to exalt certain players? Remember, this is entertainment. This is narrative. But it's also competition. So you have certain teams that are able to transcend what the NBA wants to have done. Period. Like they certainly did not want the bad boy Pistons to win in the late 80s, but they won. They didn't want the Pistons to win in 2004, but they won. All right. You have certain teams who are able to transcend the script. There's only so much that they can control. And now they have certain refs whose job it is to guide the game. They have certain players who they can activate or deactivate. Monarch athletes. But sometimes things don't go as planned. That's part of entertainment. Right? Like they say, they might rewrite the script, or they might have to do an edit to the script because certain actors start to ad-lib. That's just how it goes. They didn't particularly want the Spurs to do as well as they did in the mid-2000s. But that was a time period in the NBA where they were trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And that's why the Lakers were so important in the early 2000s, because they were able to bring a lot of glamour back to the NBA after Jordan retired. Remember, right after Jordan retired, you had the Spurs who won in 99, which was one of the worst and least watched NBA finals of all time. They needed the Lakers to rise up and stay on top for a while. They viewed the Kings as a Joe Frazier type. The Kings would be a good foil for the Lakers, but they didn't want the Kings to win. And that Game 6 was atrociously officiated. I remember how much Mike Bibby dominated the Lakers in that series. They couldn't guard him to save their life. They couldn't guard him or Pager. But at the end of the day, with all that said, with the officiating, with all that, the Kings still had a chance to win Game 7, and Chris Webber came up short. I'll never forget, he had a wide open baseline jump shot. He shot a complete air ball. I can't remember if it was late in the fourth quarter or in overtime. But he came up small. And the Lakers had two of the top three best players in the series. They had Shaq and Kobe. Kobe was good in Game 7. Shaq was good in Game 7. And they won the series. And that's what it boils down to. But when you have your foot on your opponent's throat, Game 4, you have to win that game. Period.
LA went on to sweep the overmatched New Jersey Nets in the NBA Finals for a third straight title.
And the Lakers probably had the weakest, that era of the Lakers in the early 2000s, they had the weakest NBA Finals opponents of any so-called dynastic team in history. They played the Pacers, the Sixers, and the Nets in 3 straight years. You know, it's so funny to me. Many of the LeBron James superfans, they come on the internet and they say, well, you know, LeBron's played tougher competition than Jordan did, please. It's nonsense. Now, if you want to evaluate Kobe Bryant's finals competition, now that's something that can be scrutinized. Because when you win finals against the Sixers, the Pacers, the Nets, the Orlando Magic, that's why he himself states that the biggest moment of his career was when he beat the Celtics, because he knows that was by far the best team that he had to play. That was really the only championship level team that he played in his entire career in the finals. In 2004, they played the Pistons, who were a great team, and they got smoked. In 2008, they played the Celtics, who were a great team, and they got smoked. 2010, he was finally able to beat a great team in the finals.
But what if Big Shot Bob's big shot hadn't fallen? What if the Kings had taken a 3-1 series lead with games 5 and 7 on their home floor?
I think we had enough confidence in ourselves and hated the Kings enough where we could have went in there and won a game and came back and won a game at home and then took it back to the road like we did in Game 7 and win Game 7 in their building.
If they had gone up 3-1, I don't think we would have thought we were out of the series, but it would have definitely given them going home in Game 5 a huge edge in boosting confidence.
No, if the Lakers had lost Game 4, they would have lost the series in 5. Period. As it was 2-2, and they went back to Sacramento and lost Game 5. So I'm not. I mean, they can say what they want. They won the series, but Sacramento was the better team. They were just dumber. Sacramento had everything except a championship level coach. They had Rick Adelman, who, ironically enough, since I mentioned the old Portland Trailblazers, he was their coach. Rick Adelman was the coach of that early 90s Portland Trailblazer team, and he was the coach of the early 2000s Sacramento team, who also very similar to the Portland Trailblazers of that era, with low basketball IQ but a lot of talent. A lot of people don't understand. You have championship level players and you have championship level coaches. Some coaches are just good enough to get you to that 50-win, 55-win level, but when you get to championship scenarios, they don't know what to do.
Before he had missed that shot, and then Sacramento's up 3-1 at a home game coming up next. You never know, obviously. But you have the chance, particularly with the New Jersey Nets representing the East in the NBA Finals.
You know, you never know what could happen. That's why we play the games. But I tell you what, there wasn't a team that I loved playing better that year than New Jersey.
I remember
that was his way of saying that they would have waxed New Jersey, and I don't doubt that at all. They would have beat New Jersey in 5. That would have been an easy 5-game series. I believe the Lakers swept New Jersey. The Kings would have beat them in 5. If for nothing else, they would have gave away a game to the Nets because, just from being stupid. The Kings were a stupid team, but they were very talented.
I remember Pager said he had a conversation with Kobe, and Kobe said, if you guys would have won that game, you probably would have reeled off a couple in a row, because the confidence that comes with winning a championship is enormous. And I think that's probably what would have happened for us.
Instead, the loss to the Lakers turned out to be those stars.
Look at that. They were very talented, man. Look at their bench. I remember they had Bobby Jackson off the bench. the Kings, they had a lot of talent on that team. They just did not have the proper leadership to execute down the stretch.
Star-crossed Kings' last best chance for a championship. Although the team would win at least 50 games in each of the next 3 seasons, Sacramento hasn't been back to the Western Conference Finals since and hasn't reached the playoffs since 2006.
We came out on top in all of those scenarios, but man, they were one of the great teams in that stretch of 4 years that just didn't win a championship. But yeah, slowly after that, it kind of dismantled, and the organization is still kind of trying to find its way since then.
I think when Robert Horry hit his shot, I think that was the end for the Kings. You know, the Kings were always a good team, but as so many teams have tried to, they couldn't get past the juggernaut of the Lakers.
The thing about Horry is that he can knock those shots down, but how does the ball find him? It's like the ball knew, you know, go to his hands if you want.
No, the ball found him because your dumbass center hit it out to him. It have nothing to do with no basketball gods. Blame your dumbass center.
If you want to win. It was one of the most bittersweet moments in sports. But it was an exciting game, and as a sports fan, shoot, that was a great game.
All that's bullshit. Chris Webber is giving you the PG version. He knows damn well that the referees had it out for the Kings throughout that series. Game 6 was the worst refereed or officiated game in NBA playoff history. Not even a close second. So if you got him off camera, he'd be saying something completely different. But he knows when it comes to that series, yes, Game 4, they lost because of poor execution. And also the refs were trying to help the Lakers in that game as well, because they didn't want the Lakers to go out in 5. They couldn't handle that. They knew that a Kings-Nets finals was going to be death for them in ratings. Because even though the Kings were very exciting, they still played in Sacramento. You needed a team like the Lakers, who have a global following, to help the NBA through this tough period post-Jordan. This was before they figured out that they were going to have to change the rules to promote more scoring and a more up and down pace. But anyway, that's the feature on What If. And I'll probably be following this series because it's very interesting. Anyway, peace.